Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another retro adventure. At the end of a couple of weeks and the end of another poll, we've got a very slim win for Atomic Age Cthulhu. And this is a fascinating book, but we're going to be going over to the computer desktop to have a look at that in a wee second. And as usual, I'll be back at the end of the video with some other poll related stuff and some other channel related stuff. But before I do that, I'd like to take a moment to talk about my Patreons, who are absolutely brilliant people who make all of this possible, so I'd like to thank them from the absolute bottom of my heart. Their efforts are so much appreciated. Now if you'd like to join them and help support the channel, and I sure wish you would, or you'd like to see these videos a week early, or you'd like to gain access to one of the other levels of patronage we've got, then there's a Patreon in the description down below. If you check it out, it'd be very much appreciated. But anyway, let's have a look at Atomic Age Cthulhu. So, this is Atomic Age Cthulhu, mythos horror in the 1950s, which is for Call of Cthulhu. It came out in 2012 by Chaosium. And it's a new time setting. You know, we've had Victorian Cthulhu, we've had the starting era of 1920s Cthulhu, we've had modern day Cthulhu. We've even had, in one of the source books I've looked in the past, Elizabethan Cthulhu. But this is taking it into the 1950s. And to me, that just seems so right. Because I was brought up watching the horror movies of that time. When I was very young, my sister was slightly older, but we both loved horror movies. And we would curl up under the blankets in her bedroom, watching her little black and white TV set. It was, about sort of 10-inch screen, it was tiny. And we'd watch them. We'd watch The Creature That Conquered the World, I think it's called, the one with the monsters in the Salton Sea in America. We'd watch the original Frankenstein and Dracula movies late at night on TV. And those were the movies I was brought up loving. They were so fun, they were so cool. You know, atomic mutants, giant insects wandering around. What was it called? The Green Menace or something? The one with a giant praying mantis in Antarctica? Fantastic stuff. And that just seems to work by taking Cthulhu into that era. So instead of it being mutant creatures, it's Nyarlathotep tampering with atomic science to create these creatures, to create mutations. It's instead of the red menace that was prevalent in the 1950s, where everyone was worried about commies hiding out in their town. Well, if you're in a coastal town, it's the deep ones, or elsewhere it's cultists. All the things that the paranoia of the 1950s was about are kind of real in Cthulhu. There's all this horror going on behind the scenes. So the two merge great. It seems a fantastic idea. So when I heard about this book, I was really excited by it. It seemed about the best Cthulhu mashup with a time period since Delta Green, the one which is the X-Files crossed with Cthulhu, which is fantastic. It's a much heavier book and it's far better detailed and providing research than this. But this is really good and a load of great adventures. But anyway, let's have a look at the back cover first of all. So, horror mythos in the 1950s. Never before has the world faced a threat as potentially devastating as the A-bomb, and even the more lethal H-bomb that follows. Educational films show how to survive a nuclear blast by crawling under a desk, as a few inches of wood make any difference. In movie theatres, classic monsters of the 30s and 40s are replaced by atom-spawned horrors. Unseen enemies are everywhere, from devilish rock and roll music to morally corrupt books such as Lolita and Catcher in the Rye. Comic books corrupt the minds of our youths, and godless communists constitute a red menace to be stopped by any means necessary. Atomic Age Cthulhu brings Lovecraftian horror and role-playing into the post-war golden age. Here you find background and history that led to the development of the 1950s world. Along with new skills and professions for your investigators, a number of Sinister Seeds are included to help you grow your own 50s horrors, but 7 complete adventures are ready for you to spring on your unsuspecting players. And for the most place, these adventures are great. So inside, we've got Chaosium introduction page, hoping we enjoy the production, an intro page, the usual picture of Howard Phillips himself, although I'm sure it used to be a much larger picture. They seem to have taken away a full page and just refining him down to just part of a page now. The contents showing that there's the introduction, and then the adventures. This village was made for us, TV casualties, the return of old reliable, forgotten wars, high octane, LA diabolical, destroying paradise Hawaiian style, 1950s Sinister Seeds, then the 1950s sourcebook and handouts at the back. So, the introduction. Why bring Call of Cthulhu to 1950s? Because it seems to match. I don't need that explained to me, but they do. The world's still struggling at that time period. It's rebuilding from World War II, and the horrors of it. So while the 1920s setting of the original one, they're recovering from the First World War, and many of the players will be ex-soldiers who saw the horror of the trenches and be emotionally and psychologically scarred from that. These will be soldiers returning from the Second World War and facing an evil of a completely different type. So we've got talking about the different things in the time period. It talks about the adventures. This village was made for us. In a closed community devoted to exploring the newfound wonders of the atomic age, alien horrors conduct their own experiments, and our well-being does not factor into their calculations. TV casualties, television, newfangled technological wonder, or dreaded idiot box looking to enslave us all? Could the answer to both questions be yes? The return of old reliable. The space race, still in its infancy, gives birth to a world-threatening horror no one could have seen coming. Forgotten wars. The Korean conflict, never formally classified as a war, yet technically still underway today, pales in comparison to the aeons-long conflict between two ancient enemies, and a US Army tank crew get caught in the middle. A really interesting adventure that, but we'll get to that in time. High octane, slick hot rods, dirty and dangerous bikers, a commie plot, and a once slumbering menace starting to stir. Will the investigators be able to keep the lid on this pressure cooker, or are things going to blow? Fear continues to mount. Very 1950s. LA diabolical. It's Tinseltown, and the rich and famous want to dabble with the chic side of darkness for kicks. When something from the darkness starts playing with them, the fun quickly ends. I think this one would make a fantastic movie. The plot is great. The adventure itself, so-so, but the plot is amazing. But, again, we'll come to that as we go through it in more detail. And Destroying Paradise Hawaiian style. Blue skies, loud shirts, surfing, and a king of rock and roll making a movie. What could possibly go wrong? Well, the horrors of the Cthulhu mythos combined with the horror of nuclear weapons. What do you think? Anyway, so, the first adventure. This village was made for us. Now, this is set in a town which has been created by the US government for atomic experimentation. A closed community. So, this has been built, and there's all the nuclear science going on, and the Cthulhu mythos is interested in this. They want access to the experimentation. An ancient horror has been brought back from England and is wanting involved in this atomic age experimentation. But there's something off about the whole town, because it's a brand new town. It's been something built for the nuclear industry. And this really happened in America. It also happened in Russia. The two big superpowers created atomic towns, places safe for their nuclear scientists, which could be controlled. So while it looks like a standard American town, it's only a few years old. It has no history. The houses, everybody's the first occupant type thing. It's just slightly weird in that way because it's been manufactured, which sets something feeling off about it from the very beginning. But anyway, it's basically about that. There's this town which has been built, there's a murder there, and the investigators come in. They're probably going to be government agents, or they're going to be invited in by the government to look into it. It's a suicide that they're looking into. So we've got a suicide note. We got the dead man was having an affair, but that wasn't terribly hidden. So you've got other things to distract you. But basically, one of these scientists went over to England, met up with a particular Cthulhu mythos creature, which he now follows. And he's trying to open up the experimentation to give the god that he follows more power. We've got different cops in here, different NPCs, groups, the infection. So these small insects which are summoned as part of this god, and they will bite one of the players and give them nightmares of the creature itself, a giant insect. Various maps. Oh, of course, this adventure also has certain Native American aspects to it. So there's not only the super science, but there's tradition of the people that lived on that land before, all playing into what's going on. It leads to an above average adventure. There's a lot of nightmares and stuff in that. There's a lot of visions which go on because they're going to Native American sweat lodges and things like that. It's all clues out until they end up solving the situation. A few handouts for it, various NPCs, their stats, and then we're on to TV casualties, where the players are summoned to a town where there's been an outbreak of violence. People are acting oddly. There's domestic violence going on, there's fights going on, there's been a few murders. Just in a normally peaceful town, things have gone to pot. And it's because Nyarlathotep has been experimenting with a new type of television. Because he's realised humans are sitting in front of it every day, it's a way of hypnotising them. So he's created a new television through his aspects, and it gives you glimpses into other realms, including Azathoth's realm, which are driving people insane, and that's what's causing the violence. So there's an investigation to find out what links the people, a map of the town. As they investigate, they will find out about the televisions they're using. They'll meet up with the aspect of Nyarlathotep, and the effects of the television are listed there. It's fairly straightforward. To a degree, I think it's the weakest of the adventures. There's lots of things happen as violence breaks out, and they have to deal with that while they're doing their investigation, as the world around them kind of goes to pot and more people are drawn into the problems. But with that timescale, I just feel it's not terribly strong. It could be made wonderful by a great games master, but the adventure itself is the weakest of the bunch, I think. Now, a lot of people don't like this next one, The Return of Old Reliable. It's about a squirrel monkey who has been sent into space, Gordo, nicknamed Old Reliable. And while he was in space, he's been touched by aspects of the Cthulhu mythos, and he returns, becoming more intelligent and becoming a rampaging monster. This is 1950s schlock horror movies to a T, because he ends up becoming giant and rampaging, and then there's floating brains and stuff. This is not Cthulhu as you know it, but you could have a load of fun with this. This is very 1950s, and I absolutely adore it for being that, and having the bravery of going there. Now, while a lot of people don't like the fact that it's kind of totally out of tone for Call of Cthulhu, not every adventure has to be. You can do different things, and this is a success as far as I'm concerned. Going through it, we've got involving the investigators, different places they'll visit, visiting the towns. We've got different pictures of Gordo the space monkey, including where his head's starting to bulge. We've got some flying brains with eye stalks out on their nerves. We've got a cyborg assault pod. As I said, this is totally schlock 1950 stuff, and wonderful for it. Testing labs, the animal testing labs on the naval base. Different of these robo-brains as they would be in Fallout. And going through, we can see the giant brain itself rampaging as a helicopter flies away. Everything goes to pot and the players have to save the world. It's ridiculous, but very firmly tongue-in-cheek. The brain that ate the world. What happens if you fail? Or what happens if the world is saved? Then, again, a very interesting, brave adventure, Forgotten Wars. In this, the players play a tank crew in Korea during the war there. And they get involved in a battle between two ancient forces. So you've got American soldiers in an American tank with all the modern weapons that civilization can give them, fighting against two ancient menaces, and probably coming out inferior. I've been told that playing through it, the combat is extremely vicious because there are just waves after waves of enemies. And while you've got a tank and you've got modern firearms, it's just not enough. But you've got involving the investigators, they are the crew of the M-form Sherman tank Green Greta. And you got some history, it's got what their mission is, we've got stats for the Sherman tank that they're in, we've got stats for enemy tanks, because obviously it starts off as a fairly normal mission where they're fighting against the enemy. Carrying on through, we've got dangers in the night as monstrosities come out, alien weapons, the lightning gun, a village as they approach it, through all of Cthulhu, allies, different combats, Chinese defences that they've got to fight their way through, star spawn of Cthulhu, villagers who have been driven insane. We can see that the Sherman tank there fighting against Starspawn of Cthulhu as they attempt to battle for Lonely Hill, their mission's summit. A very, very cool idea. I don't think the players will particularly make it through that well, but they're disposable characters. They're a one-off. How often are you going to play American tank crew in Korea? I suppose you could keep some of the NPCs and have them turning up in modern days as old characters with knowledge. That'd be kind of fun. So we've got the characters, including the man who's behind it all. And then we're on to High Octane. And this is the very 1950s one. You've got rock and roll, you've got kids racing their dragsters, you've got a commie scare. But behind it all are reptile people. So, lots of 1950s stuff. Poodle skirts and blue jeans abound in this local eatery of David's Diner. We've got hot rodders hanging out on Granada High School parking lot. Carrying on through. Now, the next adventure has lots of characters based on known people. But for some reason, the image of Al Beauchamp down here makes me think of Boris Karloff. There's just something which pokes in my head that this is based on Boris Karloff. But I don't see his brother John here looking like anyone I recognise. So that might just be me. Carrying on through, we've got the cave, where the lizard men are based, including hibernation chambers. We've got reptile people warriors. And then all the human aspects, so a group of Hell's Angels, the communists, different people in the town who are fed up with capitalism and have turned to communism, which is obviously hated so much in America about this time. We've got different spells there, the government coming in and investigating it and what will happen as it eventually gets to a standoff. Different details of the adventure, settings including the motel, eliciting help for the final showdown against the lizard people, and the showdown at the farm to end it, as they fight off the menace. And then on to LA Diabolical. And this is the one that I think would make a great film. The setup of it is that an actress who lives out in the middle of nowhere and was part of a Cthulhu cult goes to Hollywood, gets her fame, and becomes very powerful and influential. Now, she is Jean St. Jane, but we'll see from the images of her, she's very much based on Jane Mansfield. But she meets up while she's in Hollywood and very influential with a cult, the Shadowy Church of Night, led by charismatic high priest Xander Lenoir. Well, that's obviously as well supposed to be Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan. But she joins up thinking she's joining a new cult and she'll get power. But turns out that they're all people just who are a bit disaffected. They want to be edgy and act like Satanists. And she gets really annoyed by this, so she summons real mythos creatures, which start killing them. And the players are called in because members of the Church of Night are getting murdered in horrific ways. So They have to investigate what's going on, whether the Church of Night, which is a satanic cult, actually has any power. So into the investigators, different places they'll visit. As we can see, the picture of Jane St. Jane, or Jean St. Jane, is obviously Jane's Manfield. Carrying on through, there's various characters. None of these really I recognise, but we come to the Church of the Night. Again, Davy Samuels Jr. That's obviously supposed to be Sammy Davis Jr. They've just swapped the names. It's not a terribly great picture of him, but I can work out who it is. Xander Lenoir. Now that's obviously Anton LaVey. I believe he's extremely litigious, so they've steered away from actually using the real name. Anyway, there's all these satanic cultists who are terrified of having discovered that real evil exists. We've got night gaunts that have been summoned up, different places, different creatures, and a showdown at the ranch at the end where they go up against the evil actress. And then we've got Destroying Paradise Hawaiian Style. I believe this is the final full adventure in it. And this is basically, players are called in because a Elvis Presley type musician is making a Hollywood movie about surfing. And if that doesn't ring any bells, then you're probably a lot younger than me. But they're called in, but there's various stuff going on. There's a cult trying to summon a creature from the waves. Players will obviously suspect it's the Deep Ones, but it's something totally new. And so we've got various stuff. Because of the time setting, this is actually Hawaii before it was a state. So there's a lot of political disruption going on as well, as things are happening politically in Hawaii, because it's only like 2 months after the adventure where that happens. So we've got information about the area, some lovely maps, different mythos entanglements, different people they'll meet. They'll eventually end up on filming scenes. You can see the outriggers, the film unit, and the main actor surfing on the surfboard with stunt doubles standing in the back. So they get onto a film scene. Again, it's an interesting adventure. It's not terribly strong. There's some fun to be had. We can see the undersea creature, not a deep one, but something fairly simple. A bunch of handouts, and then we're on to 1950s Sinister Seeds. Now, in this section, every paragraph is a seed for an adventure, just to get your mind working. So, the 1955 hurricane season was a very active one, culminating in the August of 1955 with Hurricane Diane, which caused over $800 million worth of damage from North Carolina to New England. Just what caused this intense storm season? Who says Ithaqua only comes in winter time? So, we've got an event that happens, and a lead-in that a games master could make into an adventure. What else we got? Let's find us more. A quiet suburban street is gripped with paranoia when a neighbour begins to act strange. He has been inhabited by the great grey scholar and is now in danger of being killed by the anxious neighbours. But the Ithian is harmless, and the body it's hosting needs to survive so the original occupant can return. So we've got an idea. The United States has its Roswell, but did something land in Mother Russia? Tightly controlled Soviet media said nothing, of course. But nothing can make the Cold War even colder than an ally from Yugoth for the Ruskies. A bunch of ideas in. There's some fabulous stuff. I definitely could see some of them being something you can rush with, and some of them are very 1950s. We've got mention of Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier. And then the final section is the 1950s sourcebook. So we've got information about America after World War I, President Truman, the re-envisioned leader, the 1950s America the Beautiful for most, under President Dwight D. Eisenhower, interstate highways, all the stuff that was changing about America at the time as it was rebuilding from the war and using its new global superpower status with nuclear weapons to build itself into something far better. So, a country in its golden decade. We've got employment, things about the space race, information about living in America in those years, automobiles, America's new love, different stuff about sports and television. We've even got a panel showing the top TV programs of each year during the decade of the 1950s. The biggest songs each year. Stuff about radio, how that was revolutionizing, where kids were listening to radio and listening to music and rebelling. What new movies were coming out. And we've got a big list of notable sci-fi movies of the 50s. And so many of these are the ones I watched as a kid. The Flying Saucer, The Thing from Another Planet, The Man from Planet X, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Invasion USA, Invaders from Mars, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, War of the Worlds, Creature from the Black Lagoon, in 3D, Them. What else? Teenagers from Outer Space, which was hilarious. The Fly, an absolute classic. The Monster That Challenged the World, that's the one set at the Salton Sea, which I find so fascinating because the Salton Sea is so nearly inhabitable now. But back then there was a military base there, and the idea of people going out on fishing on the Salton Sea was realistic, where it's pretty much dead. The Angry Red Planet, The Tingler. Oh, where they prepped it up with people screaming in the audience. The only way to defeat the alien is by screaming, so if you're in the audience and you think you're getting affected by the alien, then stand up and scream. What else we got? Different fads that came in, comics books and William Gaines. Different books, including The Martian Chronicles and I, Robot. Magazines, Atomic Power, The Good. The Ugly America, Duck and Cover, The Cold War. You know, all those animations of duck and cover, go underneath a school desk to save yourself from a nuclear blast. The terror that was actually around, people building nuclear bunkers in their gardens. The Korean War, the House Committee on Un-American Activities, where they were accusing everybody of being commies and people were getting drummed out of their jobs. Racism and segregation, poverty, 40 million people are hungry, polio, a disease is defeated, homophobia, the unspoken words, crime and criminals, including juvenile delinquency, drugs, don't be a hophead, and different information about mythos adventuring, so how you get firearms, what libraries you will access, different types of transportation around, what people believe about UFOs, modern medicine and psychiatry, because obviously psychiatry has developed a bit over the 1920s, but not as much as it will by the 1990s. Drugs and research, different police powers, new skills for the game, different occupations including beatnik, greaser, disc jockey, rock and roll or doo-wop musician. We've got a bunch of the handouts which we've already seen contained elsewhere within the magazine. And as we get to the end, there's recommended websites, and then a very nicely presented leaflet with selected Chaosium titles. The Yellow Sign and Other Stories, The Keeper's Screen, Call of Cthulhu itself, Lovecraft's Arkham, etc., etc. And that leads us to the end. Now, some of those adventures are absolutely fantastic. They are really, really good. From both a tongue-in-cheek way, having a fun gaming session with your pals, to really serious Cthulhu investigations. There's a couple which I feel are a little weak, but it has to be borne in mind, I haven't games mastered any of these. It's just based on initial read-through. But the way an adventure can inspire you is often just based on your own references. So the idea of basing stuff on 1950s horror movies, which is very much part of my life, is why those adventures pop for me and might not pop for others. So that was Atomic Age Cthulhu, and that won the poll this week with some 33% of the vote. But only did that at the last minute. The last couple of days it drew ahead, because before that was Pirates of the Vistula for Twilight 2000 was winning the poll. And they ended up being neck and neck, and then Atomic Age Cthulhu drew ahead. And I have to admit, it's the one I really wanted to cover, so I'm really glad of it, because it really interested me for all of the reasons I've just said in the other segment of the video. But anyway, it came in on 33%, Pirates of the Vistula came in on 31%. Behind that was Decision at Midnight for the Star Trek role-playing game from FASA on 20%. And on joint last place was Ice Demon for Dark Conspiracy and First Strike on Paradise for Star Race, both on 8%. But anyway, they're all out of the poll now, and we've got a fresh one, another retro RPG one. But for some reason, YouTube seems to have changed either my account or changed the system in total, so instead of having 5 options, now I can only put 4 in the poll. So, the 4 options this week, and I've tried to make them good ones. First up, we've got Shadowrun 5th Edition from Catalyst Game Labs in 2013. Now, I've covered all of the other versions of Shadowrun except 5th and 6th edition. I don't own 6th edition, so I won't be covering that until I've picked it up and had a look through it. But 5th edition I've played a lot of, and I don't know why it's taken me this long to put it in the poll. After that, we've got Cthulhu Tech from Back Sky Studios from 2007. Now, this is something I picked up fairly recently. I've got a copy of it sitting here, and I'd love to cover it. It looks absolutely fascinating. I liked it when it originally came out, but I never picked it up then. And then I saw it in a charity shop near my house and just had to get it. After that, we've got Boot Hill 2nd Edition from TSR in 1979. Now, I've covered the 1st edition of Boot Hill, and it wasn't much more than a gunfight simulator. Not like a full war game, but just for skirmishes and gunfights in the Wild West. There wasn't much of a role-playing game there. There were a few interesting rules, but definitely wasn't a role-playing game. Whereas 2nd edition, I've been told, is. So I'd be absolutely fascinated to cover it and go into some more details. We've been covering so many of TSR's early games, their 1970s, 1980s games, which were brilliant. So I'd like to keep that going and have a look at Boot Hill 2nd edition and see whether it lives up to everything else. And finally, remember we've only got 4 positions this time, is Rifts South America 2. For Rifts, from Palladium, came out in 1995. Now, Rifts books are always worth a look. They're fascinating stuff, and we already covered Vampire Kingdoms, which is some of South America, so looking at the rest of it, I think there's a lot of history in South America which Rifts will play with and introduce a bunch of different stuff. And as I said, the artwork and storytelling in Rifts books is absolutely first class, so you'll not be disappointed if it wins the poll. But it's now in your hands. Let's see what you vote for. What else I've been up to? Well, on Drive Through RPG, I've been not really releasing much. I've been bundling stuff up, so if you want some of my older stuff that I've talked about in the past at a cheaper price, then have a look at the bundles I've got available. The link is in the description down below. And over on RPG Gamer, well, we're coming to the very end of the Knights of the Old Republic comic series. I'm up to issue 50, the final issue. I know there's a short series which came out after that, Knights of the Old Republic War, but it deals with a different storyline and it only has one of the characters in it. It's not really a sequel, it just involves some of the same people. So this is the final part of it. There's some really fascinating stuff going on, and I now have to go through and stat out all the heroes. So if you're into the Star Wars D6 system and you're interested in seeing what I'm creating for it, or contributing and letting me know where I've gone wrong, what ideas, what I've missed, then go over to rpggamer.org and check out the daily updates. But anyway, as usual, I think I've been wittering on for quite long enough, so thank you very much for watching. As always, most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.